I want to welcome you guys tonight. My name is Natalie Fritz, and I am the archivist and director of outreach and social media for the Heritage Center. And tonight, this program is about the history of firefighting in Clark County. And if you're muted at any point during this, you can always unmute whenever you wanna jump in and say anything. But this is, we do these virtual programs about twice a month on different historical topics. And we always record them and make them available on our Facebook page and on YouTube afterwards. So anyone can go back and watch them, or a few people see them later can tell us more information. These are a very laid back affair. We ask people to, jump in if they see something in a picture, or help us add more information to anything if you have a story to tell or anything. So while you might be muted now, feel free to unmute if you ever want to share anything. You can also use the chat function, which depending on if you're on a phone or your computer, it'll be a different part of your screen. But we'll try to pay attention to the chat if you've got any comments that you'd like to put in there. So I had asked the fire chief, Brian Miller, to join us tonight to start things out, because I thought before I get into the history of firefighting and the fire department in Springfield, I had hoped that Brian could join us to give us a little bit of information of where we are today, anything that's going on. I noticed one thing today, that they were giving the service awards for people that had for their years of service with the fire division. So that was nice to see. So Brian, I'll let you go ahead and share whatever you'd like to share.
Okay, so I'm going to be the exact opposite of the history, right? Like, I want to talk about where we're headed as a department. It doesn't really matter which generation you came up in the fire department. We have always had some challenges, but we've been super blessed as of late. The citizens have gotten behind the entire city, really, by passing a couple of levies. And it's always easier to manage a department when you have some funding to do that. We've been able to really spruce up our all of our equipment and our apparatus. We still have some old stuff, but every year we're picking away at that and getting a lot of new apparatus and equipment. And most recently, we were blessed with a whole bunch of ARPA funding from the federal government. And it was been decided that we're going to spend that funding, at least a large share of it, on building 3 new fire stations. So we've had some consultants come in and talk about how many stations we should have and where we should put those. So we're very, very close to launching what's called a request for qualifications from design professionals, so that we can select an architect to help us move forward on these 3 fire stations. 2 of the locations have already been selected. One is at 2040 South Limestone. Many people in the community probably recognize that as the site of the old Wendy's there on South Lime. Perhaps one of the most exciting things about that location is it's close to Clark State, and it's going to give us an opportunity to partner with Clark State and maybe co-locate their fire training program and our fire station in one spot, so that just a short drive up Auburn Avenue, we can access the fire training center on Clark State's campus. So that's a really unique partnership that we've leveraged for several years, and now we may get to share a building. So we're pretty excited about that. In fact, we meet just tomorrow with Battalion Chief Lynn and his representative, Doug Shantz from Clark State. So we're excited to move that project forward. And then the second location is at 811 Burt Street, site of the old Buffalo Road Roller or Vite Broom. It's about a 17-acre site currently. So we're going to kind of remodel that old industrial site, and we kind of have some tentative plans to house our Box 27 there. And if you're not familiar with Box 27, they're a volunteer fire organization that really we rely on super heavily. They not just bring canteen goods to us with hot coffee in the winter and cold drinks in the summer. They actually have a compressor truck that fills our SCBA, or our breathing cylinders that we wear on our backs. And without them, we would be really hurt operationally. So we appreciate them. And the significance of Box 27 was that's the old pull station that activated the East Street Works fire, and that's like over 100 years ago now. There was a fire that ripped down through that neighborhood, known as the East Street Works. And so we're really redeveloping the site where that fire happened. And so housing box 27 along that corridor, hopefully will bring some of our tradition and our history back, even though it's going to be a new building. We want to house box 27 and their 2 trucks and their fill station in that station. So then the real challenge for us left when it comes to all 3 is finding a station location for the third station we're going to build. We're debating whether it be east or west. We had kind of early on talked about building on the east side because we see some growth going on in the city out there. But there's also an opportunity maybe to take 2 stations offline versus just take 1. Or in other words, we could go from 7 stations down to 6 and maybe still provide the same level of coverage and response times, which would save the citizens some money. So that's kind of a really super brief on what's going on as far as new stuff in our fire department. We're super happy to be bringing on some new employees. That's probably something else I don't want to gloss over. So we're currently our minimum staffing by charter is 127, and we've lost a few people through some retirements and a few resignations, and then we have 15 conditional offers out right now that'll bring us up well above our minimum staffing, and hopefully all the way through 2022 we'll be above minimum staffing. So that's super exciting for us to be able to provide some additional services through bringing some extra folks on. So I don't know, I guess maybe I should take a breath and let some people jump in there with some questions if there's anything.
That's really great to hear everything that's going on. I know that it was hard a few years ago when the levies didn't pass, and we saw some stations not able to provide the services that you guys are able to. You're getting back up there, so it's great to hear that there's going to be 3 new stations and everything. So that's really good, and I'm glad you guys have the support.
I should probably point out that the 3 new stations will be replacing old stations. They won't be additional stations. There's been a little bit of confusion in the community on that, and I want to make sure I clarify that the reason we're getting new stations is because of the age of our old stations, and they really don't meet our mission any longer. When these stations were built, we really didn't run EMS the way we do now, and quite frankly, we have an ambulance in every station, and we've had to make some really significant modifications to our current stations just to fit modern day apparatus inside the buildings. The door heights, the door widths, the apparatus floor day depths, the depth of the apparatus floor, they're just not designed for modern day apparatus. We literally had to jackhammer the floor out of station 3 just to fit an ambulance in the back door. So we are bursting at the seams with all the equipment that we currently have in order to meet our mission. It has evolved dramatically over the last 50 to 60 years, not just EMS, but hazmat and all the special rescue. They all bring equipment and apparatus with them, and these stations were not designed to house all of that. So it's going to give us some flexibility, and hopefully, these buildings are here for 75 plus years, and we can be visionary in how we craft those so that they bring some safety to our current firefighters and future firefighters. Who knows, maybe we'll be having fire apparatus that are driven by batteries and maybe even drones landing on the roof. Who knows? We're going to try and take advantage of all the latest technology and be very visionary when we build these.
That's great. We'll look forward to adding all that new that information to future presentations as we look at how things have changed and developed over the years. So if anyone has any questions, I don't want to keep you too long, Brian, if you've got other things, but we'll, if you're still around and people think of anything later, we can address any questions towards you. I'm
going to stay on the call. I just want to listen in. If somebody has a question later, I'll be glad to jump in.
Well, thank you. Well,
Thank you.
I want to start out with explaining why we have so much of the history that we have here to be able to share in this presentation. The majority of what we have is thanks to former Captain Cal Roberds, who was with the department from 1953 until his retirement in 1985. And in the 70s, when he became captain, he was struck by the fact that there wasn't really a good history of the fire department. So he worked on the book From Buckets to Diesels, which is a fantastic history of the fire department. The copy I have here doesn't have the dust jacket on it, but it's got lots of great pictures and facts and figures and pictures of all the stations and personnel. And so that book is something that was available for people to purchase. And I know people can still find copies around town, and they have them at the library. We have them at our research library. But we also got all of the photos from Mr. Roberts' collection of personnel, fires, training, historic fires, all sorts of stuff, and equipment as well. So he passed away in 1995. And at one point he had been president of the Historical Society. So he was obviously a, very history-minded person. And he donated a lot of that we're able to preserve in our collection. And on the left here, I believe that this was his captain's helmet that we have as part of the collection. And a lot of the equipment that you'll see later in the presentation is all part of the, for the most part, stuff that came from him. So we'll be sharing some of the things that we have and some newer donations that we've received as well that help us to tell the fire history.
Ford Aquarium annual pass. It's your best value to see through the Santa.
So best place to start is with the history is just to tell you, in the early years, there was not a fire department. There was volunteer fire companies, different ones. I've seen a couple of different conflicting things as to when the very first firehouse was built. According to Roberts' book, there was one built in 1830 at Southwest Street, which was later Fountain Avenue, for Fire Company 1. But I've also seen in other places that that the first one was built in the 1840s. So I'm not sure if there's anybody around that knows for sure about that. But we do know that some of the early fire companies, volunteer ones, there was the Neptunes, the Rovers, who are shown here.
All right, we go. What are you doing the category for this round, which is our puzzle round, and our 5 people.
And the way we have the Rovers Company picture we have here from 1859 is actually a part of our collection. And I'm not sure, Casey, if you're on here, if you can remember the exact size of this, but each picture there is a glass plate negative picture. And it's about 3 by 4 or so. And then they're all in a big frame. So
it's probably about 4 feet long, all told. I'd have to.
Yeah. So this is stored in the museum. We try not to handle it, obviously, because it's all glass. So, but occasionally, I think the majority of it has been photographed up close. But there's some big pictures, big people in there. Some of them, this guy above this is one of their apparatus here from 1859. Right above them is Thomas Kaiser, who was one of the surveyors who laid out Clark County. So one of our earliest maps we have, and he's actually shown with his compass there. So we've got one of his pictures reproduced more. And then General J. Warren Keifer, later a general during the Civil War. Here he is much younger, serving with the Rovers. So the thing that with the volunteer fire departments is, they were not a paid staff, but one of the stories that we had always heard was that they often competed with each other to get to a fire and fight it. And we've heard some stories of a little bit of sabotage happening between the different companies, but nothing specific that I've seen. I haven't gone back to read any of the newspaper stories, but some of you may have heard some of those stories as well. But the early companies, the first official volunteer companies were formed in 1837. But before that, it was kind of the duty of people to try and to help, people have their leather buckets at home to kind of help with the fire brigade and put things out themselves. And they had, that was kind of their insurance. And then the first, the volunteer brigades were disbanded following the Civil War. And that's when we see our first paid fire departments. So this is a great picture we have of all of those early ones. And Brian had talked earlier about the East Street Works, East Street Shops Fire, which were the largest shops under one roof next to the Krupp Works in Germany. And they had kind of the original story was how they were built for the Champion Reaper and William Whiteley. And you'll see here in this picture, we have our Ski Shaner, local volunteer who's a recently retired dentist who portrays William Whiteley in his East Street Shops during our Night at the Museum program. So he had built the East Street Shops to build the Champion Reaper, which we have one of those in the museum as well. He ended up going bankrupt in the 1880s, and new companies were throughout the East Street Shops. So still very, very large shops with a lot of different companies over there. And they had kind of a spectacular end that highlighted some of the faults with firefighting capabilities at the turn of the century. One of the issues that they had was when we knew that there was a huge boom in building. If you're familiar with Kevin Rose, the local architectural historian, he talks a lot about the 1890s were a huge, huge time for Springfield with lots of new buildings. And it was great for Springfield to have all these new buildings, but the fire fighting capabilities couldn't quite keep up with that. And if you read through the papers in any time, in any area, you see that it seems like there's fires all of the time. There's a lot of things that are happening with lots of new buildings close together, issues like that. But with the East Street Shops, one of the problems was that they didn't have the proper water pressure out there, further out in the city. And there's a really great article that kind of looks at a lot of the issues behind what happened at the East Street Shops and what went wrong. And it points out that very close to the time of the fire starting, they had petitioned to add more. I think Jeremy probably knows more about this historically, that they wanted to add more, they wanted to have more water pressure out there closer to that. And they also wanted to have more alarms and they were turned down on both accounts, or at least one of those accounts. And then the fire happened not long after that. Happened on February 10th, 1902. And it burned almost completely. You'll see the damage here. There weren't the firewalls like they would have today that would stop them from blowing through everything. So that happened in February 1902. So that was one of the big fires that helped to highlight some of the issues. A year later, almost exactly a year later, on February 19th, 1903, there was a fire that broke out right downtown at the corner where they had the Black's Opera House, which had been built in 1869 up here on the left-hand corner. There was a new YMCA in that corner, and Kaufman's clothing store were all around that corner. And the fire had come almost a year later, and you can see this is a great picture showing what it's like to fight a fire in freezing cold temperatures. You can see it's all freezing as they go. And this is the Kaufman's corner shown here going down. So this would have been, I've got in the next picture to show you, this is 1906, a few years later, as they started construction on what is now the Fairbanks building, First National Bank building, Hall Plaza, whatever you call that building on the corner of Fountain and Main there. You can see it's under construction just a few years later. But this fire there had been at least a few casualties. There was a jewelry shop owner that was killed trying to move some of his wares out. He was killed by a falling wall, I believe. So these were two things that happened right at the turn of the century that made them realize they really need to modernize more. In going through all of the pictures that we have in our collection, there's a lot of things throughout here, but I thought maybe the best way that we could kind of organize the next bits is to go through some of the different equipment there was through that, and then some of the engine houses that were here in Springfield. This comes out of Roberts' book, one of the first engines, and this is where you guys, the firefighters on here, can explain the difference between a fire engine and a fire truck. Is that different, or is there some, what's the difference between the two that makes it an engine? If someone can clarify that.
So Natalie, if this is Jeremy, so a fire engine has a pump on it, it carries water, and that's what we use to stretch hoses from and extinguish the fire. A fire truck, or a ladder truck, as it would have been back in the day, would have a mechanical ladder that you could get up to upper stories of the windows. It would obviously have, back in that period, would have had wooden ground ladders. It would have had a lot of salvage equipment that they would have used, as you said, to help the shop owners try to preserve some of their wares. And it would have had a life net as well, because people that were trapped on the upper floors, that was one of the options that we used for them to jump. It was kind of a leap of faith. You've probably all seen the life net with the big circle. About 12 strong firefighters at the time would have held that, and the occupant would have jumped out into it and kind of fell into it. So that's the difference between a fire engine or a pump and a ladder truck.
With the catching people, is that something that, is that a practice that is still done at all? Is that an option? I hate to sound stupid, but
no, not at all. Not currently in the American Fire Service. It may still be done in some of the third world countries or over in Europe, but ladders and their dependability have grown significantly, in some cases up to 140 feet. But I do believe there might be some, I saw some retirees on here that might have just come on at the cusp of when that life net, we had stopped using that here in the city of Springfield.
I know this early engine here, then I guess because it pumped water. This is actually a model. They didn't have any pictures. Well, this 1840, we didn't have anything back that far, but this was a model that they got from a museum in Philadelphia to show this is what they would have used. But we've got some actual local pictures here, and this is all the same engine that we had pictures of in different parts of the collection. And that's when I realized, oh, this is out in front of the central station, which you'll see better pictures of that in later photos. But this was actually a Kelly Springfield model truck. So it would have been made locally. And these are all around 1915. So this would have been about where the library is now. And then we've got some later years. This is a 1929 Seagrave at Engine House 8. Which I was going to say, I couldn't find any pictures of Engine House 8, but there's one in this picture I'd forgotten. I couldn't find any pictures of it alone. And then we've got a 1937 American La France at the Central Engine House downtown. And then 1951 Orrin Roanoke at Engine House 9 on State Street. So Brian, you talked about having older apparatus. I'm not sure how old a engine needs to be for it to be considered old. Are we talking they're used for 10, 20, 30 years? I mean, what's the life expectancy for any engine?
So currently we try and get engines out of our fleet by about the 20-year mark, at least frontline service, and get them into reserve service. Because of our station limitations currently, especially at Station 3, We have engine 3 in service now, and I think it's about 27 or 28 years old. And it's the only engine in our fleet that actually fits in the building. So we're kind of forced to keep that in service. We actually have a reserve apparatus that's much newer, but won't fit in the building. And our ladder trucks, we try and make sure we get those out of the fleet by the 25-year mark. Ambulances were not, I mean, at one time they were 15 years, and we're trying to move those up to about 8 years before we reach chassis. So, you know, budget cutbacks forced us to take some of those a little bit further than we wanted, but ideally, probably 7 or 8 years where we reach chassis a medic unit. We keep an engine for 15 to 20 years before we put it to reserve status, and a ladder truck in a 20 to 25-year range. Hope that helps.
Yeah, well, it's good to know none of these would be what they would have been out of use a long time ago. This is a great picture from 1920. I wasn't sure what this was here, but this is one of the downtown parades where it's all decked out with flowers. We didn't have anything else more identified about this, what time of year or anything, but it looks like it's probably a Memorial Day parade or something. Showing one. I wanted to go, I figured I'd go in order for the engines. Are there 7 stations currently in the city that are in use?
Yes.
Or is that the right number? Okay. So this is the central engine house, and actually I'm not sure, this is an illustration that we had, but if you compare it to the actual building, I don't think these are the same. This is an illustration. I think that maybe it's not what it ended up being, but this is one that we had. Our volunteers have been working to scan a lot of the stuff from the collections, and this was they had scanned a whole big collage of all of them. But if you've been out to the Hartman Rock Garden, there was a model of the central engine house out there. And this is a great picture here showing horse-drawn out here. But I've got a few more of the central just because it's such a great looking building. We have quite a few pictures of it. This one gives you a little bit more, shows up more of the buildings that were around it. So this would be where the library faces out onto Fountain Avenue. Right where this sits right now. So I think the tracks would just be a little bit further down. And this is a model here of the engine house that was done by Bill Swonger, who did all of the downtown models that we have at the museum. And this was a later piece that he had done, but that's not down in with the rest of the models. And then we've got there's a great postcard of it there that shows the main headquarters. And then this is a great 1903 one where they've great Photoshop pull out everything else around it. And then this one is from the 40s into the 50s. They stopped using it in 1954 when they opened the current Station 1. But I wasn't sure when the top got removed from here, because you can see clearly it's gone. So I don't know if anybody remembers seeing the top on the central station or when that building was officially torn down. I'm not sure how long it was over about where the library is. So that's our central station. And then this is Western Engine House number 2, which if you've been down on Wittenberg, that was originally factory. It's now Wittenberg. That's the I'm not sure if it's still the Machinist Club, but there's still definitely something there on that corner. And you can see the great arches are still there. And then this one we also have identified as Station House number 2, but I was a little bit confused by if it's actually the same building, because I couldn't seem to line anything up with the current building. So I'm not sure if anybody else looking at this can make any sense of it, but according to the picture identification, it says it was Fire Station number 2, which opened in 1876 on Factory Street. This picture is from 1886. It says it was a converted factory that was remodeled. and it closed in 1932. And it lists some of the people there. There's a Captain William Kuntz, Charles Wirtz, Tom Morton, George Fallraff, who later became the chief, and Charles Nelson. So I'm not really sure if this is actually two, because to me, I couldn't find anything that looked like the same, that it was the same building. Unless we're looking. Yeah, there's the arches are, unless the arches were added later or something, but yeah, it doesn't look like the same building to me, but that's how we had it identified in the collection along with the people in it. This is 2. This is 3, which is was on Selma Road. It was Clifton and Bowler at the time that it was built, and it was used from 1882 to 1959. And then 4, this is one where we every Thursday we have a then and now picture in the paper. So this was one of the sad ones where it's a parking lot now. But the original Laganda house, one on Laganda Avenue, number 4, was built in, it was built in 1886. It only cost $2,000. And not long after it opened, it ended up dealing with a major fire at the James Leffel Company. That was they had a factory on Laganda, and this picture is from about 1903. And then you can see a later picture from 1968, and it was they stopped using it around the early 70s because there's a and this is one of the current stations that's, is it number 4 still in use then on Laganda? Okay. And this one opened in 1972 out there. Number 5 is if you're driving down West Main Street, it's next to, is that Thomas Tape? Is that Thomas Manufacturing? Is that
Taylor Manufacturing.
Taylor Manufacturing. I knew it was a T. I drive by it every day. So that's down on West Main Street. That one opened in 1898, but I didn't have the close date because when Roberts' book was written, it was still in use. So Jeremy, do you know when they stopped using that one or how long it has sat?
I do, Natalie. I've got a little history on it. So that building was Old Engine House 5, and New Station 5, which was built on Commerce Road to help with the expansion over in that area. I actually have the logbook from Station 5. Before computers, the house watchman was required to keep a logbook of all the runs that came in, all the people that came into the building, whether to visit or if a chief came in and did an inspection, kept a log of all the equipment, kept a log of the condition of the horses. So I was fortunate enough to, when the fire division actually was getting rid of the logbooks, they actually were going to discard them. They were going to throw them away. And luckily, Mike Rucker and Richard Bennett got a hold of them, and they brought them around and asked anybody that was currently on the fire department if they wanted to kind of take some of that history. And I decided that I wanted to grab a few, and I was fortunate enough to get 5s. So the logbook that I have, Station 5, closed on September 11th, 1981. So September 12th was the first day that New Station 5 was staffed by Springfield Fire Division. So it's kind of ironic that 20 years to the day, September 11th, 1981, September 11th, 2001, that firehouse went out of service and the new firehouse went in. And even in the logbook, the firefighters identify they're in the process of moving over to the new station. They had to go over twice a day to water the grass at the new firehouse, and that was documented in the logbook. So I'll bring that in sometime and let you take a look at it and share some of that history.
Yeah, that would be great. We actually got, we have several boxes of logbooks, and off the top of my head right now, I can't think of, they're from the 70s, but honestly, I I don't think I knew enough to pay attention if they were from a particular station. I remember going through them when we got them in and helping accession them, but I probably didn't know, and I'll have to go back and look and see how we described those, and if there's more information, because they probably were from just a particular engine house, and I didn't realize that. I'll have to go back and check which ones they're from. But I remember flipping through them and thinking, wow, they had to write everything down. They were everything they were checking. So that's just, I wonder how long that logbook must have been. Well, this goes through the 80s, so the handwritten logbooks, I'm not sure how long that was done like that. Or how many more.
Natalie, we kept handwritten logbooks probably until, I want to say, maybe 2006. And then we fully transferred over. But yeah, we still kept logbooks. Even when I started on the fire department, we were still keeping a logbook.
Good to know. There's probably a lot more out there that might eventually someday make their way somewhere else. Here, so this is Engine House 6 on Mound Street. Love the tower on that one. That was in use until 1958. I'm not sure where 6 is now. But Brian's got a trivia question there. How many fire chiefs have served the Springfield Fire Division over the last 171 years? Only 25. So what's the average time to serve as chief? Is it, well, I guess we could write them all down and figure out the average between all 25 of them. I've got a few in another slide. Realized we didn't have pictures of a lot of them, but I've got a few coming up. Number 7 was over on Cecil Street. So in Northern Heights neighborhood, it opened in 1900. I meant to look up where 101 is. That would have been pretty close to Limestone, I think. So this is 7. And then I did not have a picture of 8, but I realized it was in that earlier one. 8 was the one that was called the Fairgrounds engine house on South Yellow Spring Street. And that was used through the 70s. But looking at this picture actually of engine house 9, it was kind of reversed. It had rounded doors and squared windows above the top and a triangle one. So it was very similar, but engine house 9 still stands, correct, on State Street, and that's a police substation now. And it looks pretty similar to this later picture here.
Natalie, it's very similar. It breaks my heart that the doors are painted dark blue, but at least it's gone to good use in the police community program, and it's a substation for the community to come together. The police citizen group meets out of there, and they're doing a really good job. They've kind of preserved some of the history. Before they took it over, it actually was used by the traffic department from the city of Springfield. They took it over when it closed in 1975. So it's in pretty good shape, but like I said, the doors are painted blue for PD, but it still looks relatively the same.
And then this is directly a page out of the book from Roberts' book, showing the newer engine house that opened in 1953. At that time, this was when the book was published in 1978. So I think, I can't remember. I realized we didn't have any pictures of the engine house. Like, we don't have one now, what it looks like aside from the picture in the book there. But the screenshot, there's
Natalie, it looks very much the same from the front. There's brown garage doors on it. There's a really nice red bench out in front with a little bit of decorative trim underneath the front door. But if you took a picture today, it would look very, very similar to what that picture right there looks like.
Mm-hmm. I swore I screenshotted it and had a picture that I stuck in here, but I must have forgotten to put it into the slides to show that it does look very similar. I actually had a picture of it from Station 1, the bar across from Station 1. You could see them across from each other. This was one that was in the stuff that we scanned from Roberts' collection in the archives. That was the Independent Rover Firehouse on South Center Street. And all we had was this sketch. So I'm not really sure the history of this one, if it was something that ever actually existed, or if that's what I have in that picture, that one that said it, you know, didn't quite look like the central engine house. It looked kind of similar to this too, but not quite either. So I'm not sure if either ever actually came to fruition, but it was part of his collection. I think I'd have to do some more scanning through his Buckets to Diesels book, because it's probably in there that answers my question, but I just had not got, I ran across this one yesterday in his scans of stuff that we had done. I wanted to throw in some stuff from out in the county as well. This is the
More legs and a head with two faces. But fearing their power, Zeus broke them into two separate parts.
Ooh. This is the house, the town hall in New Carlisle. I think they're converting it, part of it, back to the town hall usage, but it had been part of the police and fire department headquarters. The jail, movie theater was also there. But the picture on the left here is from 1937, when they had a community open house when it was reopened following damage from a fire, which I thought was kind of ironic considering the fire department had also been in that building. But this was a good then and now to show that while it does look a lot different, it is in fact still the same building. And their city offices are back in there in New Carlisle. So that's out there. Over in German Township and Tremont area, this was a picture that recently came to us from the former Captain James Hoberty. His wife had brought his dress uniform to us and some other stuff along with this picture. And the picture came to us without any identification in it. So this was one that I put up on Facebook and asked if anybody could help identify anybody in there. We know that it's volunteers, medical personnel, and board members are also included here. And we'd had it up for about 12 hours and just about every single person in the entire picture had been identified. So we've now gone back and edited that picture to make sure that everybody is included in there. But that was one where we knew if we threw it up online that people would be able to identify everybody in there. So that's a great picture that we have there.
Natalie,
Yeah.
this is Bonnie Hoberty.
Hi, Bonnie.
Hi, and I'm glad to see that picture there. I did want to say how happy I am that they're having a new fire station at Burt Street, because that's where Jim and I raised our two daughters, Deborah and Rebecca. And he and his dad had the auto repair in Lawrenceville, and he helped start the volunteer fire department out there. And this is a tribute to the volunteers, to my husband, Jim. It's just wonderful to see this. We've been very connected with the fire department because Jim loved it, and happy to see that they're having something there on Burt Street where we raised our two daughters. So thank you for showing this.
Well, thank you for bringing it to us, Bonnie. We're really happy to have it. And you'll know a lot of the stuff that we have is from the Springfield Fire Department, but you know, we try and collect stuff from out in the county as well. And this is part of the story that we can help tell. And thanks to everybody who helped identify the people in the picture, we can have all the people identified as well. So we really appreciate you bringing that to us. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Wanted to talk a little bit more about the support groups. Brian had mentioned Box 27 Associates, and I wanted to be one of those, well, actually, guys, in the book it talks about that they did name it Box 27 Associates after that. But I guess Mr. Roberts did more research and found out that that was not the box that had been pulled out there for the East Street Shops fire, but that several newspaper reports reported that it was 27. So I think it was like 68 was actually the one that had been pulled, but they, you know, he was having one of those, well, actually moments himself. But that is where the name came from, was at least from one of those initial reports about the East Street Shops fire. But they, like Ryan said, they're there for support during fires, to have refreshment, to refill the breathing cylinders there that you can see here. I'm assuming that's what's happening in this picture here, right? That with their truck here, they're refilling those cylinders. And I just had to throw in a picture of one of our late volunteers. Warren Downing had been a proud member of Box 27 Associates, and I know he really loved being a part of that community and the family out there that helped to support the firemen at the fires. And I always enjoyed talking to him, and I know other people have too. So I wanted to put that in there. And Jeremy mentioned that his grandson Jimmy is with the fire division now. So they're one of the local things of support. And if you ever driven by the fire department, you'll see that there's a sign for their driveway that says Smilin' Bob Way. And I know that when I first moved here, and I had to go to the fire department for you guys to help me with a car seat, and I wondered what the Smilin' Bob Way was, and I had looked that up back then to figure out why he had something over by the fire department. In 1974, he had established a Smilin' Bob's Heart Attack Fund and helped raise money through on WBLY, and it had raised something like $800,000 that helped to pay for the certification of over the years, more than 400 paramedics, and helped bring in emergency equipment in the early days of emergency medical services in the county. And as Brian mentioned, things have changed a lot over the years, that a lot more of the medical EMS services were more integrated into the department. So things did change. In 2011, what was left of the fund was transferred to the Springfield Foundation so that it could still be used. I'm not sure exactly how it's being used, but I know that it's still there. And at some point they had renamed that little street by the.
Hey, Natalie, I can weigh in on that.
Yeah.
The Springfield Foundation does manage that trust, and the interest from that sum is still usable for sending people to paramedic school. It doesn't generate a lot of interest, so we don't use it very often, but that money is still available, and we appreciate the Springfield Foundation helping manage that trust fund.
That's good to know. So it's there. People are interested in that. Just want to some other great photos. This is one that came out of the book. It has Jack Graham and Charles Hyvee of Engine House 9 with Smokey, the mascot, on the 1929 Seagrave. And it said that Smokey was known for taking up a lot of the seat, and he would often force the other firefighters to ride on the running board, and he would sing along with the sirens, and people could hear him coming down, howling along as they're coming to a fire. So I had a question about fire dogs. Is that something that has been in the area or was in the area that anybody knows of? I mean, obviously this picture is from the 1920s, so I'm not sure if that was something way back in the past that wasn't continued. Does anybody know currently? There's no fire dogs now.
So actually during Jeremy's time and my time, this is Brian again, I'm sorry. We had a dispatcher by the name of Joe Kelly that brought Ashes, the fire dog, into the fire station at Station 1. And that was from the mid 90s, probably to the early 2000s. before Ashes kind of got a little bit too old to ride, but Ashes still accompanied Joe to and from the dispatch center on his duty days. So that did make the 21st century as a tradition. And Ashes was a Dalmatian.
Very cool. This is something that I had run across in the paper was, and I had made me look up a little bit more about it. It's fire marks. It used to be something that if you bought fire insurance, you would have this up on your house to show that you were in fact insured, and that if there was a fire at your house, that you had paid for your fire insurance, and that the firemen could come serve you. I wasn't sure if that was ever something that was put into practice here. This obviously this guy was collecting them, and he was a Springfielder, but the article really doesn't talk about if it was a practice that was done here locally. I know that was something that I first ran across at the Ladder 11 restaurant that they have in Dayton, that was the old firehouse. They have fire marks on the wall there in one of the rooms. So I don't know if any of you guys knew anything more about the history of fire marks, or if that was something that you had to prove your fire insurance, or they weren't going to come to your house. That seems kind of cutthroat, hardcore. Thought it was something that only happened in the game of life, that you had to have your fire insurance there.
So Natalie, this is Jeremy. That actually that was throughout the nation with the fire marks. And to go back to your opening statements about, you had read that sometimes the fire departments would compete with each other and actually fight at fires. They would fight each other to see who could put the fire out while the fire continued to burn. And what they were fighting over was, if a property had a fire mark on it, that meant that it was insured. And that meant whatever fire company put it out would be paid for their services. So fire marks definitely were used in the city of Springfield. In fact, I'm not gonna say where the house is at, but there is a house in Springfield that is a period house to the late 1800s that has a fire mark still on it. And the reason I'm not going to say where it's at is because it would be very easy to find if I gave you the street, because it's probably the one of two houses left on the street.
Well, now we're going to drive around all the houses where there's only all the, that's really, yeah, that's really interesting to me that you had to. That makes a lot more sense now, the fact that we talk about them fighting over it, because I always wondered, well, how did they prove who, what was the big deal? But they wanted to get paid, so
yep.
that makes a lot more sense. A couple more.
This is TC Store, Dave Store's wife.
Yeah.
His dad gave us a couple of these. We actually have two of them.
Oh, great.
The fire marks. I'm trying to share my content. We actually.
I can spotlight you just a second. That means
okay.
People will be able to see you bigger.
Okay.
There you go.
It's Supreme. It has been hanging. He got it from his father. It is very cast iron metal. And according to David and his dad, if you had one of these hung outside your door, the firefighters would come first. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian and Jeremy. And we have another one that was from his dad. And if anybody can see the detail, and yeah, it's pretty heavy, but they're actually very cool. Dave's bringing another one. It's got more intricate detail. If you can see this, look at this.
That is so neat.
It is very, very cool. So, and then according to what I know about it, if you hung this outside your door, then that would ensure, Dave said it's called like a form of insurance. They would come to your house and put your fire out. So
if you didn't have it, they didn't put your fire out.
Yep, that's all I can say. So it's getting heavy. So Dave, you have to take it. Okay, you can take me off. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. I know that that's definitely my goal now, Casey. We need to get some of those in our collection. I don't believe, I remember when I first ran across this, I tried to figure out if we had any in our collection, and I couldn't find anything about them. Another form of fire insurance was to have you know, your have a fire extinguisher, and this was a form of a fire extinguisher that you would use. You'd pull the pin and throw it to the base of the flames, and you can see that it's put out by Rodney Moffett and Son Insurance Company. So they were either probably giving these out to their clients as their insurance. And, we've got, this is one of the fire boxes. We have this one down in the museum. So they all have certain numbers on it then. I guess we probably should know which number ours is. I don't know offhand. If that's something we can figure out on the side there, but yeah, this one's down in the museum on the first floor. And then here's some other pieces that we have that come from Roberts' collection, a fire lantern, an old fire truck bell. And then this was actually given to us from the city just within the last 10 years or so. And it was the old signal that hung by the fire station. Because if you've ever been near a fire station, when an engine gets called out, you know that the lights stop you there so that they can get out. So this would have been one that hung by one of the stations. I'm not sure which one that was exactly. We probably have that in our records, but I don't know that offhand. Few other things we have in the collection. We have a number of speaking trumpets. These would have been, these are more ornamental ones. They're, you know, fancy, engraved, would have been given more as ceremonial presentations to in the fire department. But the speaking trumpet would have been like a leather kind of, I can't think of the word right now, when you need to talk loud, not a blowhorn, but just to amplify your voice at the scene of a fire. So I don't believe that we have any. Casey might know better if we have any of the regular, just plain leather ones in our collection, but we had some of the ceremonial ones that were part of it to help amplify voices. These ones were given to members of the Rover Independent Fire Company, Springfield Hook and Ladder, and the Union Volunteer Fire in Neptune, the ones that we have. So these are from the early 1900s. We have this hand crank wooden fire alarm that goes click, 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 click. Let me have that there. Let's see. Don't have any more information about that, but I can't imagine. I mean, it's kind of loud. I guess if someone's putting a lot of power into it, we just kind of clicked it to see if we could get it working.
Natalie.
Yeah.
So this is Jeremy. So a couple things. I wanted to go back. I'm in my Buckets to Diesel book while you're talking. So I wanted to follow up because I too had heard that story that box 27 was not the box that was pulled. And I'm looking at my records, and the East Street shop box number, it specifically says East Street box is box number 63. The fire alarm box that you have in your collection, I can't really see it, but it looks like it says 2215 or 2216 on it.
I think it was 2215.
Okay, I don't see a 2215, but 2216 was the Taggart Warehouse Company on Sherman Avenue.
So would you guys have going back in your records to figure out what 2215 would have been probably?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can probably help with that and try to track that down for you.
Yeah, that would be pretty neat.
And then this fire alarm, real quick, what this would have been is you have to think they're back in the early days of fire prevention, even before the telegraph system would have been used for fire alarms. They would have had night watchmen that would have rode the streets looking for the sign of fire. And what they would have done is they would have used this clacker, this fire alarm, as they went to alert people of fire, along with yelling. And then they would have told bells to let people know that there was a fire. And they used to ring the bells based on what ward the fire was in. But you have to think back in the late 1800s, we did not have weather-tight windows and weather-tight doors. So even though this clacker is a pretty rudimentary alarm system, it would have woken people up back then, but that's what that would have been used for.
Good to know, because I was thinking, I don't feel like that would have gone very far to alert
Yeah,
people.
that they would have went through the neighborhoods and yelled alert, fire, and
Well, this is another alert system that we have in the collection, though. It's a 1930s roto ray siren, and I looked up something similar that they have, more modern ones, where it I guess that flashes the tricolor and has the siren on there as well. But this was an ad that I had found for it. It was made by the Buckeye Iron and Brass Works in Dayton. And I think they might have made the model that we have. And then the biggest, coolest thing that we have is our 1924 Aaron's Fox that's in the museum. I think it was used at, right? This means it was used at 6. This big 6 on here. Again, never thought about it until I was putting this together. I'm like, oh, ours has a 6 on it. That probably means it was used at Station 6. Never thought about that fact. And then we've got a hose rail back here behind it, along with our model of the East Street shops before they had burned. But the Aaron's Fox, I meant to go find it. We have some great pictures of it being moved into the building. Casey, I think you're driving it in one of them. But it's a beautiful piece. And I think, was it Mr. Link that had that? Is that how we ended up? I can't remember who last had it. I'm not sure if Casey's around.
Mr. Link, Dick Link was the one that donated to us.
Donated it to us, yeah. And this was great. I think I've got a little inset up here. This is their night at the museum. Kristen Schultz is, I believe, a volunteer firefighter. She dressed up and was out there by the Aaron's Fox during night at the museum, talking about some of the fire equipment that was on there, and she had brought some modern equipment to kind of show people the differences between them, and was standing at that station. So that was pretty neat. Natalie,
yeah, I'll give you, this is Jeremy again, and some history that had been passed on to me about that. There's some members that probably know this story better than I that are on here, but I was told a story that they used to take this engine 6, the Aaron's, to musters, and they were on their way down to Cincinnati to a muster and came across the car fire as they were heading down to Cincinnati. Joe Gray, I believe, was the one that was driving, and they pulled over and put the car fire out before the Cincinnati Fire Department got there on the initial call. And I don't know if that's, it looks like Captain Day is shaking his head.
Yeah, Dave,
I thought it was. So
Dave shared that story.
Details.
I'd say Dave shared that story with me, actually, when he came. I say the next slide shows when Dave was here in July, and he shared that story with us about the Aaron's Fox. So this was kind of what precipitated me realizing we really need to do something about the fire department. I can't believe we haven't thought of that before for a virtual program, because we have so much stuff. But Dave brought in some stuff back in July, including a new Carlisle Fire Department helmet. He didn't bring the bugle there that had belonged to his father, I believe, right, Dave?
I still have it.
And then the fire department drum corps, and he actually pointed us to the page in Buckets to Diesels where you can see that same drum. And was your father in the drum corps there? I'm looking to see if he's in the identified people there.
Yes, he played the bugle in there, Natalie.
Yes, so that was great to have. I'm
just hanging on to the bugle while I'm alive.
and that's all right. We're happy to have what you brought us here.
Those drums are cool.
Yeah, very cool. And we've got you shared some other things with us. This was an article from 1986 talking about how. So wait, is Neil? Is this your fault? Which one's you're muted? You're muted. I'm not sure if you're talking, but this is an article about how father and son had.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's my brother and my dad, and they both saved lives on Stanton Avenue. 20,
And
30 years apart.
yeah, this was a really great article about them both being with the department. And
Yeah,
then you were, I'm not sure, I can't remember when you said when you had retired.
I retired in 2004 after almost 25 years on the job. But my dad and my brother, they saved ladies on Stanton Avenue in 1964, I think, and then 86.
So yeah, that's a really, really neat story there.
Same street, same name. It's pretty cool. I'm proud of that.
Yeah. And then I just wanted to share some other just general personnel things that we had throughout the collection. This is one from 1901 showing George Fulrath was the chief at that time. I had featured him a couple of weeks ago as the Who Is It for our Who Is It Wednesday on our Facebook page to talk a little bit more about him. Unfortunately, he was there during that time at the turn of the century where there was a lot of deficiencies that were found and just the ability to fight fires, and he ended up eventually stepping down as he was there during the two of the biggest fires, the East Street Shops and Black's Opera House. But you can see this was from 1901, so all these guys were part of that as well. And we've got some great, a whole big collection of these portrait cards, all done by Barnum photographers, and you see Mr. Fulrath here. This was I ran across, when I was putting this together, I realized that someone had contacted me about a Fred Garrity, and I said I didn't think we had any pictures of him, and I realized, oh, this is probably Fred Garrity here. So I need to go back to that researcher and tell them, yeah, we do have a picture of him, and he was with the fire department. But there was some other pictures I wanted to share that we have of former police chiefs, Bill Eddington, and his wife in 1960. This guy, I didn't know who he was, but he was in a fire chief's truck at the Memorial Day parade. So I was hoping there was somebody that could tell me who it was driving the car here. And then we've got Donald Lee, who retired in 1998. He passed away a few years ago, and he had been chief for a number of years. Some just to show you some fire photos, because that's a lot of what we have in the collection as well from Roberts' collection. Western School burned in 1954. Right after kids were coming back from Christmas break, they'd all brought their Christmas presents to show for show and tell. So that article talks about they had, leave it behind and go outside while the school burned. And then if you go back to any of the newspapers, you find great detail about the department responding to this. But this was a really great story that we'd run across. Probably Bob Holsizer ran across this if he's still on here. He likes to go through the newspapers and find interesting things for us. But 1914, this says, frat girls and scant attire fight flames. This is talking about girls at Woodlawn Dorm. There was a fire and they started a bucket brigade to go up to the attic to try and fight it themselves. And no one thought to call the fire department, which luckily at the end of the article, it mentions that the fire department showed up. But this was actually another fire at Woodlawn at Wittenberg in 1937. And you see it caused a lot more damage than that 1914 one, which they got under control pretty quickly. Some other ones that we have in the collection, the Kaufman building, which had been part of the 1903 Black's Opera House fire block. Their new location, they had suffered a fire in the 1920s. So this shows the aftermath of that fire here. And then here we've got a picture of the 1922 fire damage at the country club. And then we've got a few that we've talked about in then and now pictures showing the old King building is now the parking lot that sits next to the State Theater. But there was a big fire in 1956 that there might still be, might be people around that remember that. There was apparently, according to the paper, thousands of onlookers that were repeatedly shifting the ropes to get beyond, to get closer to look at the fire. So the firemen had to battle the fire and try and keep them out. And then this is another one that was in the paper the other day showing the old courthouse burned in March 1918, and it was completely gutted. You'll see in the next picture that it had a nice tower there. They ended up using the foundation of the for the current courthouse, but they turned it the other direction so that it now faces limestone. It used to face Columbia. And this is the old building here. You can see that's the old jail that stood till, I think, into the 70s next to it. And then this is after the fire. You can see tops have been burned away. And I know lots and lots of courthouses have that story. People say, oh, we can't get that record because it burned in a fire. Everybody's got that story. We definitely had that story here. A lot of the courthouse records were burned in that fire. That's why there's no 1890 census that people can access, because there was a fire. They burned all of it. Some other ones, Avalon Park out on Leffel Lane had a fire in 1930. And there's lots of detail in the newspaper about the fire response there. This is one at Crystal Lake in Medway area. And this is one that it was kind of a mystery. We had these pictures. We were never quite sure exactly where they came from. And somebody else going through the paper found this, and we realized, hey, we have those exact same pictures that were taken for this. So we were able to finally go back and date those pictures and say, yeah, it was from a 1949 fire at Crystal Lake. We've got Jefferson School, which I think is in the paper tomorrow, is it then and now. This was the original Jefferson School, opened in 1904. It burned in 1928, and then they built a new building there, which was the one that was torn down just a few years ago in 2008 at the corner of, what is it, Fountain and McCrite. So more coverage of that. And then this is one of those great, I've got this on the next slide too, insurance cards that Trump Littleton was one of those insurance companies that would send, he was working with the photographers Weber and Harrison to go out to the fires, take pictures of the fire, go quickly develop them, scratch their name in there, and go back and hand them out to the onlookers of the fire to say, if you don't want this to happen to you, get fire insurance. Which all makes so much more sense now that I know about firemarks, but I don't know if the fireworks probably weren't in use that late, but it would get people thinking about, protecting themselves. This is another thing that, unfortunately, you can find a lot of information, firefighters that are lost in the line of duty. This was one that, if anyone knows Daryl Perkins, I've got a little bit more about the memorial that he had helped put together on the next slide, but he tries to acknowledge those that have given their lives in the Miami Valley, and he has a memorial, and he does something on the anniversary of their deaths. And Hugh Garrity had died in 1928. He was a captain with the fire department, and he had contacted trying to find pictures and more information to help honor him. And if you want to find out more about the Miami Valley Firefighter and EMS Memorial, it is located in at 255 West Spring Valley Road in Centerville at the Stubbs Memorial Park. And it's designed to represent, the triangles represent the fire triangle of fuel, heat, and oxygen. And it lists the counties that are covered in the Miami Valley. And then there's an honor roll of names listing the department that they served with and the date of their deaths. And that's something that they try to keep up. And there's over 70 names on there. So that's something that he has a Facebook page for the Miami Valley Firefighters EMS Memorial Facebook, where he posts those whenever an anniversary is coming up. So that's a really wonderful thing to be able to do to honor them. I forgot. Well, this is something I wanted to ask the firefighters about their fire escapes. Is that still a thing like this? you know, you don't see them on the sides of building anymore, but if you go back through all of our, you know, old photos, they have, you know, cascading down the sides of our old buildings throughout town. When did this stop being a thing? Does anyone know anything, the history of that?
Natalie, so in the city of Springfield, those fire escapes are required to be inspected annually to make sure, you know, because they're exposed to the weather, to make sure that they're still connected sturdily to the building. You know, they've not rotted or deteriorated or started to pull away. So we don't have any of them in the city of Springfield that are truly in service. Mm-hmm. However, in the bigger industrial cities, New York, Chicago, they are still very much used by both residents and firefighters alike to gain access to the upper floors of the building, but not so much here in the city of Springfield.
I'll say you always see them in the movies and TV shows and big cities and everything, and I've always noticed them in these pictures and never really thought about them. The fact that, well, they're not really there anymore in town, and they're definitely not being used like that. Yep. These were some great pictures. This is another, wanted to make you guys aware of another really great resource. This is the Springfield Fire Journal in Ohio Fire History. It's run by Vinny Del Guidice. He's a reporter and fire buff and former fire volunteer who maintains this blog about tell the story of, you know, different fires and things like that. And it's always been a great resource for me. And I know he's contacted me in the past to help get stuff from our archives to add to it. So that's something that's out there if you're interested in finding more. And then I did not want to end without mentioning how indebted we are to the fire division for their service and helping us through our major water disaster that we had in April 2019. This is my boss Roger walking down the hall, and you can see we had water pouring in through from the ceiling from a burst pipe on the 3rd floor of our building. Most of it came down through the 2nd floor and onto the 1st floor and damaged, you know, Arts Council offices as well. But their quick action, they were, you know, the first on the call and alerted Roger as to what was going on, but they were able to help turn the water off. And you can see they had the brooms helping to push the water out down the hall, down through to our elevator, and it turned the video sideways, but I've got. So I don't know if I had there was no sound on that, was there? I don't think. Okay, I didn't have the sound on, but the ironic thing about
side, and so luckily in our archives, we're safe up there.
That's Roger talking about how the archives were safe. Well, we found out about a week later that the water damage had been bad enough in the archives that we also had to tear the archives apart and rip up the floor. So that night we thought that, oh, well, at least we dodged a bullet in the archives. But if they hadn't been there to help push that water out and they set up tarps throughout some of the rooms, and then they had to pulled out big trash cans to help catch a lot of the water. And you can see the water was only going for less than an hour, and you can see how much had filled the buckets that they did have out there. So and then I wanted to show you this particular room because this is where a lot of our fire equipment was, which we've since, you know, everything's been moved and reboxed and recovered and all of that as well. But you can see we've got another firebox and some of that stuff that you saw in the pictures. This is where it was located at that time. Our rooms are completely redone, reorganized, and they do not look at all the same the way they used to do. We reconfigured everything after the flood. But if we hadn't had their help, things would have been so much worse. So I wanted to end with this, the Servicemen's Memorial that's over at the corner of Limestone and Columbia over by the post office. That has our first responders on it. And so, you know, I hear sirens are there right now behind me. They're always there for us, and you know, so we always appreciate all that they do, and we look forward to seeing how things grow and change. I actually think that's a fire truck out there, definitely. So hope it's not going anywhere. Yeah. So our thoughts are always with you guys. I always tell my kids when they hear it go by, you know, say a prayer for whoever they're heading to. But we appreciate all that you guys do. And wanted to share this, that we'll continue to share programs like this in local history. We do stuff on all our social media to share stories of local history, things like this. Our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and then I've got a link here if you're interested in donating monetarily, but we also, as you see, we take donations of stuff all the time as well. So I want to thank you guys all for being here. That's the last slide I have, so I'll switch back to so we can see people. But I want to thank all the people from fire department, past and present, here tonight that helped add to the story. Oh, it looks like Dave's got a you can, I say you're muted. Is that a hose attached?
It's called a Detroit tip, Natalie. It's a heavy 40-pound, maybe 30-pound. It's got the colors on here.
I'm making him give it to you.
For Station 3.
It's got to go.
And if you roll it down, you can put another piece of hose on here, so you'll have a valve to shut off the hose.
He'll explain.
I'm sure Jeremy knows what this is.
So you said station colors. So does each station have their own?
Every station had their own colors.
Is that still true?
That is true.
That is true. And Jim Day's here.
Come here. Okay, Station 6 was green, right, Jim?
Okay, Jeremy.
I don't remember. It's been too long.
Yes, TC.
Interrupt him, please.
Station 7 was blue.
I'm going to mute him. You need to answer that question.
Sure, blue. I don't know.
He has one. We're donating it.
So how do
yellow was Station
8.
4.
8. Jeremy knows.
It'll be coming down.
It's coming your way.
David, when
thank you.
I don't remember any of them.
David, when you and Captain Day were on the fire department, there was really only like 4 primary colors. We've expanded since then.
So what's the significance of the colors other than to show your station pride?
Well, when you had your bedding, there was, I believe, yellow for Station 5, because probably back in the early days, people didn't clean their sheets, and you wanted somebody next to you to be clean.
Okay, Jim Day's here too. Captain
It has
Day.
nothing to do with bedding. It was about your tools.
Okay, Jim.
Your axe
Dave,
was
let Jim talk.
your axe,
Jeremy,
your
stop
Captain
them.
Jim Day.
They're arguing because we watched this video and they.
It was
Jeremy?
for your tools, so they wouldn't steal your hose or your axes or your pike poles or your ladders. You had your company colors on, so you get your tools back after a fire.
That is correct.
That's all I got to say.
But the bed,
okay.
but the
I'll turn
bedding,
it over to David now.
but the bedding
Jeremy?
color.
Hey, we're moving.
We're
She muted it. Thank you, Dave, for sharing. We'll have to, we've been doing interviews, sitting down and doing interviews with people. We should probably just do a fire department. I mean, we're recording this, but we should probably sit down and do a fire department interview, talk to former and current, but we'll have to figure out how to keep everybody so that everybody can share stories and stuff. I know just talking to Dave in July when he was here, I heard a lot of good stories about training that he helped implement and everything. So that's something we'd love to sit down with more people and get some information about how things have changed over the years. And I'm learning so much more about that. This is as with most of the programs I've done, this shows a whole other world that I don't know a lot about. It's really interesting to learn more. So thank you guys. Does anybody have any questions?
No, thank you. We had a great time.
Oh, thank you so
Wonderful
much.
time.
I
Okay,
really
Bye.
appreciate you guys all being here,
You're-
and I appreciate the fire department for everything that they do. So thank you guys, and thanks everybody, and hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Bye.